My name is Satish Kumar, and I'm the Executive Director and President of the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy. And I'm going to be the moderator of the next panel titled Efficiency for Industrial Competitiveness. My organization, the Alliance for an Energy Efficient Economy, we promote energy efficiency as a resource and work and collaborate closely with the government and industry to promote energy efficient products and services to help Government of India achieve their energy security, clean energy, and climate change goals. I want to thank the International Energy Agency for organizing this 11th Energy Efficiency Conference, and also for showing its leadership in doing the research, the analysis, and providing guidance to the policymakers around the world, which acts as a bedrock for some of the most forward-looking energy efficiency policies that come out from different countries, both in the OECD as well as, I think, in developing countries. I also want to acknowledge the leadership of the International Energy Agency in terms of providing the doubling the rate of energy efficiency, which is an excellent framework for both the governments as well as the private sector to showcase their leadership and to do much more than what is currently being done, as I think the latest reports are telling us. I think, again, in the ministerial discussion in the plenary, Dr. Fatih Birol and ministers have highlighted the importance of energy efficiency in these turbulent times and what's the role that government and industries leaders can play together. I'm going to be focusing on the industrial competitiveness, I think, in this panel, along with our fellow panelists. As you all know, the industry accounts for nearly 40% of the global energy demand in 2025 and recorded its fastest growth since 2019. We have also seen that the disruptions that can be caused to the industrial supply chains, as was seen in the COVID, and I think as we are also seeing the supply disruptions of energy because of the Middle East war, can have some pretty significant impacts on industrial competitiveness. This underscores the centrality of the economic performance and its exposure to rising energy costs, competitive pressures, and geopolitical uncertainty. In the panel discussion, we are going to examine how well-designed policies can unlock the full potential of energy efficiency, reducing cost volatility for businesses and enabling firms to compete better in rapidly evolving global markets. So without further ado, let me call all the panelists here. We have a stellar cast of global leaders and experts, and I'm going to invite the panelists, and I'll request them to sit from chair 2 onwards, I think in the order in which I am going to be introducing them. So the first panelist is Ms. Charlotte Mehta. She is the president and CEO of BC Hydro. Charlotte is BC Hydro's president and CEO and has been on the member of the executive team for more than 6 years. Charlotte has overseen the control centers, water management, and field-based employees responsible for operating and maintaining BC's Hydro's extensive infrastructure, which includes over 300 substations, 80,000 kilometers of transmission and distribution lines, and 30 hydro plants, which collectively provide reliable electricity to 5 million customers. Welcome, Charlotte. The next panelist is Ms. Paula Glover. She is the president of the Alliance to Save Energy, and AEEE has had the distinct pleasure of working with Alliance to Save Energy during our inception. Paula brings more than 25 years of leadership and expertise in the energy sector to her role as president of the Alliance to Save Energy, a bipartisan, non-profit coalition of businesses, government, environmental, and academic leaders dedicated to advancing federal energy efficiency policy. She has a background in electricity and natural gas distribution. Welcome, Paula. The next person on the panel is Jes Munchhausen. Jes is the CEO of Rockwell Group, based in Denmark. It is one of the world's leading manufacturer of stone wool products, primarily for the building industry. Jes has several decades of experience in strategic leadership and corporate governance, with more than 20 years devoted to leading companies such as Terma, Grundfos, Osram, and Ledvance. Welcome, Jes. And finally, I would like to welcome Jim Matthews. Jim is the IEC president, and he has assumed this responsibility from January 1st, 2026 for a 3-year term. He retired from Corning Incorporated in 2024, following over 4 decades in industry, where he led the global standards engineering activities while also coordinating business and innovation areas. A recognized expert in international standardization, he has held leadership roles across IEC, IEEE, ISO, and other organizations. Welcome, Jim, to the panel. So welcome all of you to this panel. I'm really looking forward to your insights and interventions. Let me start with you, Charlotte. Mobilizing investment is essential to accelerating industrial energy efficiency and strengthening competitiveness. With BC Hydro and the province of British Columbia committing significant and major new resources to energy efficiency, how can large-scale utility-led initiatives support meaningful efficiency gains for industrial customers, and what role should public utilities play in driving broader system-wide improvements?
Well, good morning, everyone. Yeah, utilities have a huge strategic role to play. I'll talk for a bit from a BC Hydro perspective. We're like Hydro-Quebec. We're hydroelectric utility, big service area, 98% clean, so very large load growth ahead of us due to electrification, particularly of the industrial sector, LNG, mining, port expansion. And I would say that BC Hydro has been in energy efficiency for the last 35 years. We have our energy efficiency programs called Power Smart. It's got super high brand recognition in BC. I think it's over 80% of people will recognize Power Smart, and it's our tagline. It's part of all our advertising, so very, very embedded in our utility. And with that said, we have a most aggressive efficiency program that we've ever had in our history. $1 billion we're going to spend over the next 3 years, and we see that as a really pillar of our plan to meet load. Our load's growing over 50% on capacity and energy on our system over the next 20 years. It could be even higher than that. And we have these 3 pillars: conserve, which is our energy efficiency program, load side, demand side management. We have, it's called optimize, which is making sure we're getting every electron, per your previous panel, out of our grid and out of our generating stations as possible through our own efficiencies, and repowering and getting higher equipment efficiencies. And then the last one's build. And build is the most expensive. It's the one that's going to drive the rates the most. And so DSM is the conserve as a pillar. We are going to try and build the equivalent of an 800 megawatt power plant through efficiency and demand side management over the next 3 years. And so when I was thinking about this question of utility and the strategic role we play, I think there's a couple areas we do. One, obviously, it has to be part of every utility's brand. When they think of a utility, they have to think people, customers, residents of your jurisdiction have to think you're all in on energy efficiency, because that is the right thing to do. And they know it also keeps rates lower for them. And then secondly, I would say for utility, make sure efficiency, demand-side management is part of your integrated plan, your resource plan. It's in your supply stack. And when I say that, I mean go aggressive on it. So what we're trying to do, and we're just defending this in front of our regulator right now, is we're saying of the load growth, the very aggressive load growth we're seeing over the next 10, 20 years, we're going to supply a third of that through efficiency and demand-side management on an energy level, and as much as 2/3 on a capacity level. So we're all in on this, and we're really going to rely on it to meet our customers in the future. The other area utilities can weigh in on is on incentives to industrial customers in particular. There's huge opportunity there. And when I say that, I mean, utilities can be a bit conservative. They have to defend everything usually in front of a regulator. But what we're doing at BC Hydro, and I know our colleagues are doing that across Canada, is pushing those business cases so we can provide higher and higher incentives to industrial customers. And when I say pushing the business case, we know new cost of energy, new builds is high, so we've got a lot of room to play there, and we are actually incenting up to 100% of new energy efficiency projects for industrial customers, because we want them to have these efficiency projects prioritized in their capital plan. It's a win-win. It's good for us. It's good for them. And we also need them to help them get over their return on investment hurdles. And so, like I said, we're going all in. And what that also means is not trying to force industrial customers or industrial projects through these sort of really rigid programs, right? We know every industrial customer has unique business economics, circumstances, and so we're really trying to do customized programs in terms of like creative business models, risk sharing, and incentive levels, and just really making it easier for them to do their efficiency projects.
Thanks, Charlotte. All in on conserve, optimize, and build, and providing incentives for industrial consumers. More power to you, Charlotte. Paula, why is industrial energy efficiency such an important tool for addressing near-term affordability pressures while also supporting long-term industrial competitiveness and system resilience during this clean energy transition?
So that's a very big question. Thank you for it. I think what I would offer is that, you know, efficiency is important for industrial consumers because it's something you can do now. So the tools that we offer are things that businesses can adopt now, and in that way, when they do that, they should start to see a lower energy bill because their usage will go down. And that, of course, makes bills more affordable. May not completely affordable, but certainly the less energy you use, the more affordable your bill is going to be. But also, that savings then can be redirected to other things. So a business may use that money to invest in something for their operations, new equipment, et cetera, more employees if that's what they need. But the savings that they make from reduced energy usage can be used for other things to help strengthen that business, reinvest in that business, share it with others, whatever you want to do. And in the long term, that does make a business more competitive, right? Because the more that you can produce with less going in, energy being the input and whatever that product is, the output, the more that you can do that with less of an input, the more competitive you are going to be in terms of your pricing, in terms of how much you can offer consumers and when they need it. There's so much there. But oftentimes I would add, when we talk about this, we always think typically about large businesses like ABB and Schneider, the companies that we heard on the previous panel. And our larger challenge, but I think equally as important when we think about industrial competitiveness, is how do we do it for small businesses? In the US, we might say Main Street. So you're talking about small plumbing companies, the Subway sandwich stop, a small restaurant, because those are the kind of businesses that also use a lot of energy, but also, right, cannot incur the high cost. And the other piece of that is that when we think about, certainly in America, our economy, we often talk about how small businesses drive the economy and drive business growth. And so that would mean that those are the businesses that we need to prioritize when we start thinking about reducing energy costs, because that's how you're going to grow your economy, is by helping those businesses grow. So I think efficiency for industrial use is a twofer. It can help your energy costs be more affordable. It can allow you to be more competitive, but I also think it can help a business be more resilient and be able to withstand some of the ebbs and flows that happen because they're able to reduce their usage.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And I think your point about, how small businesses can actually get impacted, on the affordability side is a very good one. In India also, I think there are small and medium enterprises which are right at the epicenter of, many of the policies that government is promoting. So thank you for highlighting that. Yes, coming to you, we heard in the previous panel, many of the business leaders talk about, the centrality and the importance of energy efficiency. From your perspective, are energy efficiency policies delivering the results in improving the competitiveness of companies such as Rockwool, and how should energy efficiency policy be framed, in your opinion, going forward?
Yeah, but policies absolutely are helpful, but they're only helpful if they are transparent and clear, and most importantly, predictable. And then also in the previous discussions we heard, it's very important that policies are not focusing on regulatory aspects, but policies that set high standards drive a lot of change. So high building standards or high expectations to equipment. And that has been proven again and again, both in Europe and in the US, that high standards drive innovation. High standards enable capital to flow, and industries like ours to invest to energy efficiency. So it can make a profound difference. Like the chairman showed some numbers in his introduction with energy efficiency indexes, I can also say that in Europe, we have reduced our energy consumption as a continent with 30% the last 2 decades. But we've grown GDP with almost also 30%. And that's really a profound competitiveness factor. In a factory, we would call this productivity. So yes, it can drive a lot of competitiveness if the policies are made right, particularly if they are predictable and based on high standards. It also helps companies like us, and Rockwool is a company in building materials. Maybe just 2 seconds about what we do. Our name Rockwool, we literally take stone, rock, and we melt it, and we produce stone wool products, mainly insulation materials. So we're a very high consumer of energy, a real high consumer of energy. But we also have a profound impact on the insulation side. So we get back more than 100 times the energy that we have consumed, you could say. So we double down on this. We double down on energy efficiency as a company. We invest heavily into electrification of both our existing footprint by retrofitting our equipment. And then all future factories that we build are based on electric technology. And we do this not just to do good, but we do this because it's good business. Mm-hmm. So in addition to policies, it is very important that businesses can make this a good business, because that is just such a driving force of change. And I would like to say that's what we see in North America right now. We see a lot of interest in energy efficiency. We've never been this busy. We've never invested so much in the North American market as now. But the logic is very different than in Europe. In Europe, it is very policy-driven. It's regulatory-driven. In the US, and this is my experience mainly, it's more driven by business. That big, large, and small, by the way also, but businesses, institutions that own buildings and other assets understand that it makes them more competitive if they reduce their energy consumption. So it's a slightly different logic, but the end result is the same. and the benefit to society and the environment is profound when we go that way. The last point I do want to make here in the introduction is of course, access to electricity. As a heavy user of electricity and energy, it becomes, of course, a major factor in where we invest. And we are a global player. We're around, basically all around the world. And we are right now planning for 8 new factories. These are very, very large CapEx programs that we're running. And in the past, when we had to decide on where to put a factory, it was mainly market-driven. You know, where are the customers? Where should we put the next factory? And that's, of course, still important. But right after that, and I mean right after that, is the access to electricity. And to us as a company, it matters what kind of electricity we get access to. So there have been places where we could get electricity, but it was not sustainable. So if it comes from a coal plant just down the road, we're just kidding ourselves. So we're very critical on the suppliers we work with, and the reliability on the energy source, and of course also price. So today, and this is competitiveness from an industrial perspective, but definitely also for whether or not it's a country or territory or state, we will put the factory now where we can get electricity, and we will create the jobs and the growth in those areas. So the industrial competitiveness discussion has many parameters, and policy can play an important role there, as long as I said, it's predictable and it's more about setting high standards. Then industries like us and the previous speakers will come with the investments and the technology and make it happen.
No, thanks. Yes, the point that you made about, I think, growth on one side and reducing energy intensity on the other side, what I think in the energy policy space called the decoupling of the economy from the energy cost. And I think that has been, I think, a hallmark of, or the success of energy efficiency over the last half a century, I would say, and which has allowed us to grow without actually causing the emissions, I think even more emissions than we would have caused. And also, I think your linkage to the importance of electrification and access to it and others, I think are quite important, and not just in your industry, but across the board. And we have seen that in especially data centers and others, I think, where they are getting located. So excellent points. Jim, let me come to you. You are the standards person, having spent, I think, all your time and life in the standards space. So we are living in the age of electricity, but ensuring that it is used efficiently is critical. As we have heard, I think we are hearing in this panel, and I think in the plenary panels, from the IEC's perspective, what are the key pathways to accelerate the adoption of international standards to support the affordability, access, security, and efficient use of electricity across businesses and economies? The 3 speakers all have spoken, I think, about in one way or the other. So here is your, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Satish, and thank you, IEA, for the chance to be here today. I will say that I didn't spend all of my career in standards. I think a better way to describe it is innovation, because bringing world-changing innovations, technologies to the market, and standards is a very important vehicle to do that. So I'll talk about standards, but try not to put everybody to sleep. But one of the things you have to understand is that this is really the invisible infrastructure that makes all these things that our speakers in this panel and the earlier panels have talked about. Because the invisible infrastructure is built around global agreements that involve a lot of industry who come out of what I would call enlightened self-interest, because they obviously want to see the products you make, the things you use, the things you do included in that, but you achieve a reward by making a more efficient process. You achieve a reward by using the energy you have rather than having to buy more. And so all of those things come together and say, here's an environment where this works. Where it really works the best is when you have broader stakeholders in the community. So the community itself, the users, the voices of the regulators, the voices of the governments also at the table to do that. I'll give you the example in my experiences in the medical device area, where regulators from the Food and Drug Associations of the global organizations participate in the development of the standard. And by doing that, it kickstarted not only the agreement of the technology and the people to work, but also the implementation when it came time to deploy the regulations, because those were already integrated and people understood each other and how they work, and the outcome was ready for regulation on day one, rather than another year, another 2 years of long study and regulatory understanding to be able to do that. So that happens. What happens with the process that we use to make these standards? Well, first of all, you have to understand that they're open and accessible to everybody. Anybody from anywhere can come and be part of this process, and that's not often understood, but we are based on a national country model where you have one country, one vote, so the biggest to the smallest get one vote. It's equal access, and everybody's voice gets heard. The second thing is a really beautiful thing called consensus. Consensus doesn't mean who shouts loudest in the room. It doesn't mean who is the most people in the room. It means that we all work together and talk about and resolve differences in a way that says, okay, I can live with this. I can live with the outcome. It may not have been my first choice coming into the room, but it's one that everybody can get together. And you'd be surprised how durable a consensus-based agreement is, because in that case, it endures, it lives, and it's resilient for the work that's there. So now, how do standards help us to do these things? Well, you think about the fact that there are lots of things that are happening that people talked about. Some of the award recipients yesterday talked about how they took data and measured the cold impact in Brazil and made adjustments with AI to operate the freezers more efficiently in the cold systems. Well, where's that data come from? How do you have that data that's reliable? Well, we write documents and standards that create the metrology to measure things. So you measure your efficiency, the efficiency of a motor, the efficiency of a heat pump, the other things that can be done on a global scale and equivalency in order to make a real valid comparison and make good use of data. So yes, you've got to have data, and yes, you've got to use data, but first you have to have good data that gives you a valid case for doing these things. The second thing is really just a question of, can we do this in a way that is more efficient and more open and more activities? Because what you really want to do is support innovation, because new ideas come with all the time, whether it's different drives for motors, it's different ways to integrate solar PV into the grid or other things. And so that innovation is the engine that powered those reductions in the use of more carbon, and powers the reductions in, well, actually the gains in efficiency across the chart that was shown this morning. Every time you have a challenge, you find innovations are the thing that open the door to the next stage and the next level of vehicle use, vehicle range, battery technology. So at IEC, we work on trying to come up with standards to promote safety, reliability, resiliency, and accessibility. We have a saying that we are working towards the all-electric and connected society. So that guides a lot of our strategy and the work we do and what our stakeholders are trying to do, because we recognize we have converging technologies, we have lots of technologies that used to exist in silos. A transformer on a pole would be a very old and mature technology around for many, many decades, or if not centuries. But now that transformer is suddenly instrumented. It's got temperature sensing, it's got controls, it's got integration. A tractor is a mechanical device used in agriculture for planting and growing food. But now it's a smart device with geosensing, with moisture sensing around the ground and soil it's tilling, self-navigation, and all of these other things that become part of the ecosystem. So the other thing we tried to do in the IEC is also think in terms of systems. And the idea that you're not just making a standard around a part, but you've got to think about how that part interacts with the parts before and after it, and the whole ecosystem functions. So thinking about a system standard is something that helps and benefits and accelerates that use. And also, then you have a function within that system that can be innovated, because it doesn't describe a particular type of motor, it doesn't describe a particular type of equipment. You can come along with another black box that solves that problem even better with new technology. And finally is new solutions. I mean, we talked about the grid, we talked about the resilience, we talked about distribution systems that are antiquated, and if everyone on my street were to buy an electric vehicle and plug it in overnight tonight, we would blow out the distribution system at the local level of our electrical system. So we've got to have the ability to upgrade and work smartly with those, with the resources we have, but also the resources we need. But one of the things that we have to think about is also ways to get those systems to work better together, and the interaction of the fact that it's communications, it's energy, it's all of the things that are there. So the whole questions come to one of innovation, come to one of accessibility, one of sustainability, and all of these things, and standards are a vehicle that help get us there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I think your point about standards are about innovation, about data, about consensus, I think are very, very important. Yes, you wanted to come?
I got inspired by what you said, Jim, on how you broaden out the discussion about energy efficiency. You started talking about moisture, you talked about safety, you talked about all kinds. And let me give this perspective. The energy efficiency discussion has changed a lot the 18 months. I think that was clear also from the starting speakers, that we came from an energy efficiency agenda that was driven very much about sustainability. And I still think that's important, but today when we look at the energy efficiency agenda, we talk geopolitics, we hear resilience, we hear all a much broader agenda, also competitiveness like we talk about it. Now the point I want to make is, I think we also as companies have to rethink our narrative, how we address energy efficiency and what value we create for customers. Because I think on the last panel, it was also clear that energy efficiency can be at times hard for customers to understand. And really to drive it forward as businesses, I think we now have to be better at explaining the value it creates for the user, other than reducing the energy bill, which is of course still an important factor. But when we come in with technologies, it is also about fire safety, it's about better acoustics in buildings, it's about better living conditions. And I think that will again revitalize the agenda and put it in a much better spot, because it becomes a much broader founded agenda. It is also not so easy to attack politically when we only don't talk about sustainability, but we talk about competitiveness and we talk about safety. And so I think it's very healthy for us.
Okay. Thank you. Let me come with a follow-up question to you, Paula. From the Alliance to Save Energy's perspective, which policy levers have proved most effective, in your opinion, in scaling industrial energy efficiency and supporting a more competitive, secure, and resilient industrial sector?
I mean, I think it sounds snarky to say this, but I think all of them, actually. I don't know that there's one that's more important than the other, but I think everything from tax credits and enhanced tax credits to really policies that fund and establish green banks that allow capital to flow into communities that may not have capital for these kinds of projects. All of those things, I think, are equally as important. And, you know, to pick up on something that the gentleman said, I think a thing that we struggle with, certainly around efficiency, is because we have so many policies, but also we don't have a standard description for what we do, right? And so for some policymakers, energy efficiency really is just weatherization. And we have a whole policy in the States around weatherization for low-income customers and then customers who are not low-income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then we also have building codes and standards. We have appliance codes and standards, and Energy Star. And those are all policies that are equally as important, because when you start putting these things together and stacking them together, that's actually how you're able to build something for a business, so that then they can really take advantage of all of the things that we have available, from smart meters to enhance, to digital twins, to, you know, enhance insulation and lighting and all of these things. And then when they get that savings, they're able to recoup that and invest it in their own business, or however that person feels it's most important.
Okay. Thank you, Paula. Charlotte, coming to you next. We discussed BC Hydro's significant and historic investment in energy efficiency. What shifts or innovations within BC's electricity system are enabling and sustaining this kind of expanded focus on industrial efficiency? And how are they positioning the grid for long-term resilience and competitiveness?
Yeah, I mean, the load growth on our system is really driving the innovation and, well, not only the business case for energy efficiency, but yeah, just the resilience of meeting the supply. Like, most utilities feel this huge responsibility around powering the economic development plans for their jurisdictions. And so it fundamentally does change how you plan for a utility grid. At BC Hydro, I mean, 50% of our assets are over 50 years old. And so back to the opportunity, I talked about a conserve, helping customers conserve, keep their bills low. Optimize is all about getting the most we can out of our grid. And so as we reinvest in our system and repower it, huge opportunity for energy efficiency there and working with suppliers of major equipment. I talked a bit about, efficiency and demand side management's just part of planning now. And I'll give you a perspective on what utilities are dealing with. Spot loads, when you're a clean grid, you get electrification loads. LNG, for example, is an industry looking at electrifying. We are seeing loads of 600 megawatt spot loads on our system. Our biggest load right now in our system is 150 megawatts. So you can appreciate the discussions you have with spot load customers on energy efficiency when you're talking about loads that big, because 5-10% savings are like the equivalent of a power plant that we don't have to build. And so innovation is coming for us in many ways, besides the fact that we are going to have to be so interactive with our customers on the grid, two-way flow of energy, all of that stuff that this audience knows about. We are going to be interacting with smart devices behind the meter, thousands of them. And we already have a program where we turn people's thermostats down by 1 or 2 degrees. With their, we've got their permission to do that, but we don't need to inform them that we're doing it. They don't even notice it most of the time to manage capacity on the grid, stuff that you wouldn't have thought about 10 years ago. But really working with customers, particularly industrial customers, on innovative business models to incent their energy efficiency project. And I mentioned, not these sort of standard programs, but risk sharing. So, examples would be where the utility helps fund a new energy technology, energy efficiency technology, funds it, owns it till it's proven its efficacy, and then transfers it over to the customer, right? We take the risk on some of those, early adopters. Or big mines that have an energy efficiency project, like a demand side, say a grid scale storage system to help manage their load. They've got a 20-year mine life. Maybe we take that asset over in 20 years. So really innovative things on that side. And then I would say we're influencing policy too. We don't have as much say on standards. We get involved in those conversations like building standards, equipment standards for efficiency, but AI, data centers, it's a new mega load we're seeing. Our grid would be overrun by AI if we didn't put out some sort of new policies on controlling the queue of how AI data centers show up. And so one of the things that we've done is we now auction off queue positions for AI and data centers. And a big part of a bid that will be successful or not is they show their energy efficiency posture. They show how they've reduced their environmental footprint. That's just as important as some of the other aspects of a load that wants to connect to our system. And so it's pretty new. We've just launched it. We're going to be announcing the successful bids in September, but embedding that sort of efficiency policy within even how customers can connect or queue up for access to clean electricity on our grid, I think is a really good example of the innovation that's coming with utilities to respond to the load growth and the need for efficiency to be part of the supply stack.
It's hard to keep AI and data center out of the conversation.
It's very hard, but I got it in there.
Isn't it? So just a very quick follow-up, because you heard Anil Rawal, who was on the previous panel, and in India, our peak demand is growing at 5 to 7% every year. So it's just the natural, I think, growth trajectory, 20, 25, 30 gigawatt every year on year. Are you looking at this digitalization trend of like combining data from smart meters and then using some of the policy tools, working with the government on time of usage and other rates to incentivize people, I think, where energy efficiency and demand side measures can provide more flexibility and resilience to the grid?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, for our integrated resource plan, our supply stack, 2/3 of the capacity will come from efficiency and demand-side management, and it's exactly what you're talking about. It's time of use rates, which we've introduced now. It's peak shaving, all of that. Everybody's got an iPhone or a phone in their hands, and so we send out alerts, not because the grid's about to collapse, but just, from hey, it's a peak time and we're trying to change behaviors. We'll incent you to look at your phone. It's almost gamifying it and saying, if you get an alert, we'll pay you to, drop your load by 5%. And we're doing that with industrial customers as well. So we're going to pull on all of those tools. But you need the time of use rates to do that. You need the incentives. So we're looking at the whole package. And again, the business case is strong. We're a low-cost jurisdiction. Our rates are really low compared to other jurisdictions. It's actually hard for some of our customers to make the business case to pick the energy efficient option, and that's where the utility comes in. But from a utility perspective, we see the growth. We need it on our system, that efficiency and demand side management mindset from our customers, changing behaviors and what equipment they actually install.
Yeah, I think both the behavior as well as the technology, I guess, are going to play an increasingly important role in the peak side, peak demand management. Jim, coming back to you, what do you think about international standards driving like policy action to enable businesses to take immediate steps while also building the longer term resilience benefits of energy efficiency?
I think they're absolutely going hand in hand, and that's key. I mean, you look at any of the major development activities in other parts of the world, and the World Bank produced a really outstanding report for the World Development Report in 2025 that talked about the role of global standards and how it impacted not just I'll call it the accessibility resilience, but also the economy of countries that did choose to use the global standards for things like that. The other thing is, I didn't mention, but I will, is conformity assessment, which is something that goes hand in hand. IEC operates 4 systems that do assessment towards the standards themselves. One of those is on safety and compatibility and other pieces. Another one involves measuring quality and quality-related activities, including certification on carbon and carbon usage under some of the ISO standards. A third one is related to safety of electrical apparatus in mines and particled environments, whether it's mills or other things. And the fourth one is renewable energy. The idea that you're going to make a large investment in capital in renewable energy. So the solar system, the wind system, the tidal system, and other ways of doing this are certified to be up of a quality and a resiliency and use that will fit in the network and fit the purpose that the funder is paying for. So that gives people confidence to then go forward and make the investment and make the advancement and do these. So the regulators, as I said before, really, I would just ask all the regulators to get more to the table and involved in standardization, even though you see it as an output product. Let's don't have that gap between the standardization process and the regulation. But the regulators then really have to exercise the foresight and the looking at what can give us benefit now, but also that bridge to what's the benefit in the future.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Thank you, Jim. Yes, we know our global energy landscape is changing and changing very fast. Industry, as you said, needs to change with it. I think that's an imperative that you have outlined. What role do you think governments can play in creating the right conditions needed for business to commit to longer term investments that we believe is the need of the hour?
Yeah, we'll go back to where I was before. Predictability is incredibly important. And we see that in Europe right now, in many countries, struggle on when can you connect to the grid, how can you get the timing right, but also how can you predict the energy prices on electricity. And that's what makes and breaks projects right now. I have a handful of projects in Europe, very large conversions of factories, and countries that have cheap coal but high electricity prices. It's just a terrible business case. And countries with the opposite, are great business cases. But so government can help us with the predictability, and then, as I said before, then the capital and willingness to do it is there, because it is good business. I return to that argument all the time. It is really good business. But that's our own conversion. I also work on the other side. Of course, our products are profoundly impacting energy efficiency because it's insulation materials. And I think everything related to standards are very, very important. Also on institutional investors, if we can get better transparency, better standards, then, and we're doing that right now in Europe. We are activating insurance companies. We are activating through insurance companies, banks and mortgages, and setting that chain reaction free is unleashing enormous potential for energy efficiency investments, simply by renovating buildings or industrial facilities. So the government can do a lot, but it comes back to these basic things of predictability, transparency, and setting high standards of what is expected.
Okay, so based on some of the discussions, some themes that are emerging, I think there is transparency, predictability, affordability, the need for forward-looking standards. And what I would like, I think, in this round of intervention is that if energy security is becoming an increasingly critical concern for industry, including, I think, the price of electricity, how do you think energy efficiency policies can help strengthen your organization's resilience to supply disruptions and geopolitical volatility? So this is one question, and I think I'm going to pose another one, and then I'll request all of you to provide your own perspectives to this. And the other one is that with energy affordability becoming a major pressure point for businesses and common citizens and even smaller businesses, as Paula, you mentioned, what policy measures do we believe are most effective in helping industry manage some of these short-term price volatility and reduce long-term energy costs through energy efficiency? And maybe I will start with you, Jim, this time, and then we will come back this way.
Well, thank you. And I think, Jess mentioned a very important point, which is predictability. If you have plans, if you have a vision, if you have regulation that's going to lay out a pathway, then you can navigate your way through that. If it's chaotic and confusing, it's very difficult, and then the investments are much harder. But look at how profound the cost of energy and access to energy makes a difference when you're trying to figure out how to improve or alter your process, scale up your process, do other things. Those all play an important part of the world. So the ability to get everybody to be thinking about the future, but at the same time working in the present, is a real enlightenment, I guess I would say, and that means more dialogue. That's going to mean more discussion, more tools, and more innovation. Innovations come all the time. We have one that we're working on now called low voltage direct current, or LVDC. All of our systems in this room are alternating current and pulling off the grid and everything that's happening, but DC is easier to store with power, batteries with solar and other things. The idea is that you can run lighting systems, you can run environmental control systems, you can run many other things in security in buildings off of those type of grids. And you can also do things that allow much more efficiency, even perhaps in data centers, because DC-powered data centers may be more efficient than AC-powered ones. So you have to think about all the innovations that you can encourage, ways to bring more openness and dialogue and trust, and then having the ability to have a foresight and a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
I would like to comment on the affordability side from the end customer, the real families, if they can afford. And there's a big problem also in Europe with energy poverty. What I've seen happening in Europe by some politicians, and I think this is incredibly clever, they have managed in some countries, and I will mention Romania in a second, to take the policies of Brussels, who at times can be very abstract and very, very far away from the voter. And they have managed to take some of the programs and broken them down into some very tangible manifestations of change for voters. And one of the countries I always point to is Romania. Romania has a massive program of energy efficiency of homes, of home dwellings. And you have to, I don't know if you've been to Romania, but when you drive through Romania, they have a lot of these Ceausescu area, not skyscrapers, but high-rise buildings. And trust me, you don't want to live in those. But they are now renovating them at mass for energy efficiency and affordability. And that brings the agenda into the voter. And by doing that, voters can see that this matters to them also. It's very abstract for a voter to talk about the grid or offshore wind turbines. They will never see them. But their own homes, when they improve in quality and safety and health, then this affordability agenda also touches them. And I think that is something we have to consider how we build into programs more.
Okay. Paula?
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think first, durable policy and policy that withstands administrations. And so part of, I think, what's hard for everybody is if you have a policy that's been established for 4 years, and then the next 4 years that policy goes away and it's a new policy, how do you plan for something like that? But I would say the additional challenges, certainly in the United States, is that policy is established at many different levels. And right, so where there may be federal inaction, there could be state action. The state could have one desire and the locality could decide to do something else. A city or town can make, I mean, we saw this, right, when the US came out of the Paris Agreement, we had cities who joined. And so for businesses in the states, where you're operating actually really matters. You do have to be kind of dialed in on that local level to really kind of understand what the policy is for that particular area and what you're trying to do. And then the final thing I would say is, and the thing that I don't think we do really well at, is checking whether or not the policy produced the result that we really wanted. Right, so oftentimes we'll have a policy, we establish it, even if it's long-standing. If it doesn't do what the intended outcome is, we rarely revisit. And I think it's really important now that you have to revisit probably more frequently than you'd like to make sure that this thing that we built is presenting the results that we want, so that if it isn't, you can pivot quickly as opposed to letting things go on and then creating a whole new policy.
Okay, thank you, Paula. And I think I can relate to, I think, some of the whiplash kind of an action that we have seen. And I think that clearly doesn't send the right signal to the industry and to the businesses and everything. So thanks for highlighting that, Paula. Charlotte, your intervention.
I think the only thing I'd add from a predictability and policy perspective, from, again, a utility perspective, is we're all about load forecasting right now, and it's a really challenging time to get your load forecasts right. You have to basically plan in scenarios and be ready to pull stuff off the shelf for what emerges, because you can, and nobody ever talks about it, but you can overcommit to build and supply contracts, big 30-year, multi-billion-dollar contracts, and if the load doesn't show up, then, you know, there's a rate impact for that. So predictability in codes are hugely influential in how we load forecast. I mean, the LEDs and innovation, and, you know, the lighting innovation when LEDs came in, what that has done in terms of load forecasting, you know, we would have seen way higher loads right now if that innovation in lighting hadn't come through, and then codes and policies had sort of really pushed this energy efficiency on housing and lighting. And so for us, predictability on policies and codes is really so we get our load forecasts better and make really good financial investment decisions around what the grid, what the system, the electrical system looks like in the future.
Okay.
To serve load, basically.
Thanks. I'm going to ask one, I think, unscripted question, and this you can use this to give sort of like your closing remark. And I am going to blame it on Charlotte because she brought the topic of AI and data center. And we all are seeing, I think, in the news, on the social media, we are both intrigued, fearful, scared, I think, about some of these technology. And this is emerging as sort of like as a domain in its own right, both, I think, in terms of the amount of resources and electricity that it is going to consume, but also I think the way, the kind of visceral reactions that it is causing within the communities and everything. So I think with the rise of, I think, the AI and data centers and the topics that we have been discussing here about predictability, transparency, public good, I think energy efficiency, and I think we have 4 very different, I think, segments of, I think, our economy represented here. So, so Charlotte, from a utility perspective, clearly you cannot ignore data centers. I think it's a reality. You have to prepare for it. So what is your take? And I would like, because we have to wrap up, so maybe I think I'll request you to provide sort of like your interventions in about 90 seconds or less.
I think I've said it already. We're not going to apologize for pacing the queue, and then as part of picking who gets stacked in the queue, the energy efficiency piece, their ability to bid in higher than tariff rates. All those pieces will be part of the criteria, and because we have such low-cost clean energy, you have to pace it, and that's a policy decision we've made in BC.
Okay, thank you, Charlotte. Paula?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say in terms of AI, investing in community is going to be most important. And I think, you know, if I were talking to data center operators, I would tell them that jobs is actually not enough to get a community on board. But that, you know, for us at the Alliance, one of the things that we propose is having data center hyperscalers, and all hyperscalers, invest in demand response for the hardest communities to reach as a way to kind of help balance out some of that capacity. And added to that is something that Brandon said in the earlier panel, which quite frankly is you should be adopting all of our stuff first before you build another thing.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes?
Yeah, I think this can become a really big subject. We're talking about competitiveness. Of course, we need AI. I mean, we need it as a, you know, as a society, as a country, as an industry. So I do have some understanding for the fact that they are jumping the line a little bit, but I can also, as a CEO, get very frustrated when we've laid out 10-year plans with utilities, and then we suddenly see that change. But I think we can handle it because there's also a huge benefit for us in participating, of course, in building energy efficient data centers, but also because we need the processing power.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Jim.
I think
last word.
one of the last things is, I guess, you have to think about AI as a tool, AI as a service, AI as a product. It's a lot of things, but it's not everything that people who don't understand it fear it will be. But it is already competing for resources and power and everything else. And there's a session tomorrow I'll plug on data centers in the afternoon, and that will talk a little bit more about that. But I think we have to live, as Jess said, we're living in an age of rapid technological change. We have to figure out how to work through it. And by the way, we haven't even talked about quantum computing yet. So we're actually working on things that relate to that down the road, which will be even more disruptive in some ways than AI. So,
okay. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. And so we had a lovely discussion on industrial competitiveness and the role that energy efficiency can play in that. And I think one of the key themes that have emerged is that energy efficiency has to be at the center of all the innovation, all the affordability, the policy questions that we are discussing. I think it's not just the large business, but the smaller and the medium-sized business, which are also getting significantly impacted. And I think how they are going to adapt and sort of like innovate is going to be very, very important. From the policy side, I think one of the clear emerging sort of like themes has been that policies need to be transparent, they need to be predictable, so that I think industry gets the right signal and they can then innovate and plan for that. And also I think the role of standards and how it can actually fast-track innovation and let, I think, the society embrace some of the newer technology in the best possible manner, I think is something that is going to be important. So I think the energy efficiency narrative may be changing a little bit, I think, in the geopolitical context and some of the risks that we are facing, but it is definitely going to continue to play a very, very central role. And with that, I'm going to conclude the session. But before that, let's put, I think, our hands together for the wonderful panelists, and I thank you for their intervention. And we will have a photograph.